So yeah, so we are looking at three populations today. We'll look at obesity first. Obviously, that is linked to diabetes, and then we'll also look at how to train like prenatal clients and stuff. So pregnancy, actually a very important time for people to exercise. You know, we want people to stay healthy. We don't want people to regress too severely when they are, you know, maybe taking some time off. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and work our way through. So, obesity as a statistic, we do want to make sure that we are using the term like medical obesity. Now, I do want to make sure that you guys are aware, and I always point this out, but obesity is not an indicator of health. Like we do know that like there are more trends. You know, it is more likely that there are certain comorbidities and health conditions associated with obesity, right? But they are not necessarily a direct cause. You know what I mean? You know, so obesity as like a definition is going to be a body mass index of 30 or greater. Okay, so like anytime someone's body mass index is at 30 or higher, we're going to consider that obese. And the way that we measure body mass index is it is just your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Okay, so that's it. It's just weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. We're not taking into account how fast somebody can run a mile. We're not taking into account what someone's body fat percentage is. We're not taking into account how much they can squat or, you know, how mobile they are. You know, this is not a very rounded view of health, right? It's just a very, very simplistic view. And that's actually what the body mass index was for. Not to give you guys like, you know, too much random trivia to fill up your brains this, at the beginning here. But the body mass index was literally created, I want to say in the 17th century, and it was meant to look at just like large groups of population. When was the BMI? Was it the 18th century? Okay, 1830s. But and it was literally just meant to look at like large groups of people. Right. So it's meant to just like look at, you know, be able to run a quick calculation and see like what areas of town, you know, maybe needs a little bit more like, you know, food or economic aid and things like that. It was really never meant to be adopted as like an individual health thing, but you know, that's sort of how we've started using it. You know, nowadays it's like we look at BMI and you know, that's something that people are looking at, sort of judging their health. And obviously health is a very, very complicated series of things, right? Like it's not just your body weight, it's you know, all kinds of stuff. But like I said, it is associated with certain diseases. We tend to see the trends that are associated with excessive body fat are also the same trends that are associated with things like heart disease and diabetes, and a lot of other common conditions. And so we're gonna need to have like a clear definition here. The definition is gonna be in this version, the definition in your textbook is literally a BMI of 30 or greater. But sometimes you'll hear it as where the subcutaneous fat exceeds the amount of lean body mass. That's kind of an interesting take on it, because that would actually classify obesity as basically just having more body fat than lean body mass, which is like basically everything else. So that's actually getting to a body fat percentage of at least like 50, which is crazy substantial. But it's the overaccumulation of body fat, and it is associated with, like I said, many comorbidities. So you guys, I know that for those of you like Chris, you're in your final mod here, you know, and so I'm sure you are tired of hearing me break this down, but we got to break it down again because this is stuff that is very testable information. Your body mass index, like I said, it's your height versus your weight. It's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. And we want it to be somewhere between 18.5 and 24.9. That is going to be considered normal weight. If it's below 18.5, we consider that to be underweight. So that's usually like disordered eating, like anorexia is associated with that. And then we have overweight, which is going to be 25 up to 29.9. So that is where it's sort of an early warning. So that's the overweight category. And then obesity is going to be greater than 30. Now, like I said, I always want to put this in here, and it's not meant to be used as an indicator of health. It is just a calculation of your height versus weight. But there is a correlation in the average population between like excessive BMI and certain health risks. So if you look at like Arnold Schwarzenegger when he won Mr. Olympia, if you were to calculate like the day he went on stage and won that bodybuilding competition, he was at a BMI of, I think it was like 30.2 the last time we ran those numbers. So it was just putting him into the obesity category when he won the award for being the most in shape person in the United States. Like, now that being said, he is not the average person. Like most people who do have like a BMI greater than 30 have an excessive amount of like body fat. And that's why like there's definitely a correlation here, but definitely not causation. The way I always describe it to my clients, because they'll bring this up like during sessions and stuff, and we'll have a discussion on why the medical industry has put so much emphasis on this BMI number rather than basing it on like body fat percentage. I think is a much better indicator of health. Or like cardiovascular assessments like the step test or the Rockport walk test. I think those are much better. But I've had discussions with clients who are like, why so much emphasis here? And I always tell them like the way I picture it is it's kind of like going into a casino and playing roulette. Like when you go in and play, you're placing your chips down. If you put one chip on one number, you got a 1 in 35 chance of winning, right? And so like that's how I like to kind of picture like BMI by itself. Like if you go in and your BMI is outside of like a normal healthy range, you're putting one chip down on the table. Your odds of winning, and in this case, winning is actually come dealing with some type of like medical condition. So that's actually, you're not winning. But you got 1 in 35 chance of your number popping up. It's like not really that high of a statistic. But if your body mass index is outside of normal ranges and so is your body fat percentage, like, well, now you placed another chip down on a different number, and let's say you're very sedentary and you're not physically active, you're putting another chip down on the table, and so like that's kind of how I like to picture it. Is like it's not so much meant to be used as like, oh, because then like we would have bodybuilders who literally need to lose weight just to get their body mass index back to a normal range. I don't think there would be a player in the NFL who would fall into the normal category. But again, I like to think of it as like placing your chips down on the table. It does increase your risk of certain comorbidities. So again, we're looking at these statistics here. In 2006, the estimations were about 33% of the US were obese. That number has climbed to about 36% for men. And then we've got 35% of women. We've seen that number climb. I want to say it's like 38%, or maybe it's as high as 40% now. Let's find out. Let's Google it. What percentage of the current population in the US is obese? BMI 30. I want the yeah, so we're seeing 42%. All right, so that's on the climb. So yeah, so we are definitely seeing that number, climb, and it's not really slowing down, yet it's funny. I mean, you think about it like what the world is like now. Like I look around and I see more gyms than I've ever seen before. Like we've got all this like I get advertisements all the time for like meal services, and we've got access to all of this amazing stuff, and yet we still see like obesity on the climb. And it's like, well, when you think about like the fact that we just live in a very sedentary world, that is like a very common thing. And so we live in a sedentary world. The world is very convenient, like I actually didn't do it, but because it's like always my go-to example, but I need to do laundry today. And it's so funny. My favorite example is like, I will throw my laundry in and then walk away. You go back 100 years and it's like, I used to be on a washing board, like scrubbing that stuff. And then hanging it out on a line. But no, I'm going to switch it and throw it into the dryer and, walk away and live my life, So those are definitely like, it's a very convenient world that we live in, but it's not exactly burning extra energy. So why is this so dangerous? Like, what are some of the common side effects of obesity? Well, some of it is like an increased insulin response to glucose. So what I mean by that is like, remember, your pancreas's job is to create the hormone insulin when it notices that your blood sugar levels start to get high, right? And so if we think of it, if we look at like, let's see if I can find like a blood sugar levels outside ranges chart. Let's see if I can find a chart here. Yeah, this one will work. Actually, you know what? We're gonna use this one because I like the simpler one. All right, so if you look at this, like blood sugar levels, right? Like this is like the average blood sugar levels that we're supposed to be looking at, right? This blue line sort of represents like the quote unquote running average, right? So you can see it's like a little bit higher here. This is probably like right after somebody ate a meal, right? And so what's going to happen is, glucose comes into the bloodstream through diet, and then the body goes, all right, I need to make insulin in response, right? So it creates insulin, and then insulin is going to drive that sugar out of the blood into our cells to produce energy, into our cells to become glycogen, or into our cells to become body fat, right? Either way, the blood sugar levels are going to drop. So you can see it's going to drop down to like a normal range right here. And then it might go up again, like if maybe they start exercising, actually, the body will go, oh, shoot, I need that glycogen. And so it'll start breaking it down to raise blood sugar levels to give you a little more energy to get through your workout. And then, your workout's over, it'll drop back to normal. And it kind of just like hangs out around here, maybe you have a snack and goes up a little bit. But, over here, what we're seeing is like, and let's say that this is somebody who can like last maybe a couple hours between like meals, right? Like they don't feel particularly hungry. But over here, you'll notice like this person's blood sugar actually drops really rapidly. And what that could be is actually an increased insulin response, right? Their body gets any sugar in, and because it kind of gets used to that, it actually creates a massive amount of insulin very, very quickly. So then what ends up happening is their blood sugar levels drop through the floor, right? Like now, like this is really, really low. And when your blood sugar gets this low, you get cravings, you're like, you start feeling like really, really hungry. So then when I'm like this, I overeat, I know that I'm like this. I'm sure somebody else out there is hearing that. When my blood sugar gets too low, I'm ready to do two things: eat an entire buffet and murder everyone around me. Like that is what happens when my blood sugar levels get really, really low. Like I am not pleasant. And so I need to like get some food in my system to get my blood sugar levels back to normal. Now, hopefully I don't like overeat, like hopefully I'm not going to like binge on a massive amount or make like poor choices and eat like a very like sugary meal, and so like that will cause it, but if I did, like if I just eat like a massive amount of food, or let's say like I binge on something that's sugary, and this is why people get like sugar cravings, by the way, is like your body is going, my blood sugar level is low, I need something with sugar in it right now, but then all of a sudden your blood sugar levels spike outside of normal ranges, which then your body goes, whoa, we need to create a lot of insulin in response. So then it creates a ton of insulin in response, and guess what happens? It drops through the floor again. So then you get more hunger cravings. Maybe this time you're a little bit more managed, right? It's within normal ranges, blood sugar kind of drops, right? So you can see like it just becomes way, way, way harder to control, And so like that's kind of what we're seeing in this increased insulin response. Now, here's the thing. If you do this over like a really long time, and this is what we're going to see in diabetes here in just a minute, if you do this over and over and over again every single day, eventually what's going to happen is your body will actually start to build up a tolerance to that insulin. So then your cells are actually not going to respond to the insulin the same way. So you'll need to create more and more and more of it in order to have the same effect. I'm going to show us a video about caffeine today. I know that caffeine actually doesn't have anything to do with insulin directly. But in terms of like how neurotransmitters work, it's actually a very similar situation. But we're going to look at that in here in just a minute. And we're going to see that like we need more insulin to get the same amount of work done. But because it is a hormone, one of the interesting thing about hormones, guys, is that like when one of them binds, it causes the rest of them to bind. So like when a hormone has an effect, it actually kicks off a response and then the rest of it has an effect. It's kind of like lighting a fuse in a way, you know, or setting, like if you had like a line of gasoline, it's like, you know, it doesn't really do anything until you hit it with a match, and then all of a sudden they all start doing it, right? That's kind of like how most hormones work in your body, which is why hormones are so hard for your body to control. This is why, like, you know, when you're a teenager, you're very unstable. You know, you're very grumpy and you're just like angsty. It's like, it's because, you know, you're having trouble like controlling things. And so what'll happen is like your body will finally uptake that insulin, and then it will use all the insulin, and it'll, you know, and that causes your blood sugar levels to just plummet because you created so much of it. So we do see an increased insulin response to glucose where we make too much of it, but we also see insulin just randomly hanging out in the blood that's not doing anything, which means that like there's going to be a lot of it in there, and when it finally takes place, you know, that's going to drive our blood sugar down through the floor. Now, that is where diabetes really starts to like, you know, cause problems. And we'll look more at that in just a minute. But other responses that we see a decreased growth hormone. So we're going to see less effect from physical activity, which is a bummer. Growth hormone, we know is a very important hormone for us to maintain like the growth of human tissues. We are going to decrease our insulin sensitivity. I already kind of talked about that. We also, with obesity, we're going to see an increase in adrenocorticotropic hormones, or ACTH, which is way easier to say. And even that's not easy to say. But your adrenocortical hormones are your stress hormones. That's your adrenaline and cortisol. So both of those hormones are going to get created at higher levels. You know, it's just stress. Your body creates adrenaline when it's stressed. It creates cortisol when it's stressed. And cortisol is like, it's actually a good hormone in normal levels. You know, like I know that, like, I'm sure you guys have gotten you've been blasted with articles for years now that are like how to reduce your cortisol. Like cortisol is so bad for you. You know, it's one of the leading causes of obesity. And it is, like, don't get me wrong, like it is bad for you in really high levels, but like it's not supposed to be. Like cortisol is a hormone you're supposed to create to get you to experience stress so that you'll keep yourself safe in life. You know, like stress is a good thing, like in normal levels, but we live in a world where we just create massive amounts of it. Your body doesn't know the difference between, oh my God, it's tax day, and oh my God, that's a bear running at me. You know, like unfortunately, as a biologic creature, we don't really understand the difference. So we just create stress all the time. And being in obesity, we will see that. And there's some really interesting side effects associated with that. Sometimes you'll see people who create like excessive levels of insulin will experience like inflammation. That's another stress response in the body, in their joints. And so they'll experience like arthritis feeling problems. And you'll even sometimes see like skin conditions associated with this increased cortisol production. Sounds very weird, but you'll see people get like acne as an adult, or you'll see people get what actually looks like acne, but they'll get like hives. They'll get like, you know, like an allergic, you know, when you get like an allergic reaction to something, you get like those itchy hives. And it's literally like their body is just under stress. And so it's over stressing. And then what's happening is it's just sort of attacking anything that's around. It's almost like an autoimmune disease, but I wouldn't necessarily call it an actual autoimmune disease. But that's a really fascinating one that we'll see sometimes. We'll also see decreased, oh, it's the same thing. We'll see a decreased hormone sensitive lipase. So that's actually like how your body burns fat, actually gets worse at burning fat. And then we also see, and this is probably one of the most dangerous ones, increased cholesterol synthesis. Your body will make more cholesterol, particularly low density cholesterol. And that's why obesity is particularly associated with what we call hyperlipidemia or high cholesterol, where your blood vessels will actually build up cholesterol on the walls until eventually, it's just a much smaller tube, and now the blood pressure is much higher, and that has all kinds of problems. Whew. So a lot going on here, and I forgot, I just spent the whole time like this, but here's our notes that say all the same thing as the PowerPoint. I either spend my time like I'm either stuck on the PowerPoint or I'm stuck on the notes. But yeah, there's all those physiologic responses we talk about. So how do we fix it, right? If these are all the negative side effects that we are aware of, what do we do? How do we sort of approach this? Well, one of our biggest recommendations is to perform circuit style exercise. So let's say, let's just look up a routine here. Total body routine. Right? If I just look up a very simple total body routine, right? Somebody's going to go to the gym and they're going to do a full body workout, right? There you go, 45 minutes right here, right? And it's just kind of a classic approach, right? They're going to do a plank of apparently any variety for 3 sets, 45 seconds with 60 seconds of rest. They're going to do a kettlebell swing. It's kind of fun. And then that's going to do 3 sets of 12 for 60 seconds of rest. Inverted row, 3 sets of 12 reps, 60 seconds of rest. So they've got like kind of an AABB situation going on here. I'm not sure if that means that like that you're supposed to do A and then you're supposed to do B and then A and then B. I'm not sure why it says that, but oh wait, here it is. Alternate workout A and B with 1 day in between. Yeah, but that's the workout is. For example, yeah, it's a classic. Okay, well anyway, here's the thing. This is a pretty decent workout. I don't dislike this. Let's go ahead and copy this into a blank OPT template so we make it look like NASM style here. And we're just going to steal this person's workout right off the internet. I do not recommend doing this, but it makes a really good example here in class. So we're going to go plank, kettlebell, swing, inverted row, goblet, squat, dumbbell, chest press. Cool. Not bad. Honestly, I don't hate it. It's 3 sets. And this one's 45 seconds. And then the rest of these are like 12 reps. We'll say a medium tempo. Well, this is isometric. And then we'll say medium tempo for all of these. Now, here's the thing. Whoop. That's so weird. It copied the font name. Did you guys see that? I like hit copy on medium here, and then it copied from up here. It's a Calibri. I didn't even click up there. That's wild. I think my computer just legitimately glitched. And then 60 seconds of rest after each one of these. So here's the thing. I don't hate this workout. I think that this is actually a pretty decent full body workout. It's got a little bit of core in there. It's got glutes and hamstrings, as well as glutes and quads, upper back and chest. It's missing a little bit of shoulder work. If it were me, I would modify this first workout to get a little more shoulder action in there. Over here, let's see what their second workout is. Swiss ball rollout. That's a super great core exercise. I love that exercise. Back squat, chin ups. So that's very much upper back. Cable pull through. I don't love cable pull throughs, but that's not bad. And then a shoulder press. So it's kind of like splitting between like chest and shoulders. Now, if you did this routine, if we looked at this, it says do it like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like A, B, A, B, A, B. Here's the only thing that I think about that, right? You're getting 3 sets of like chest stuff and 3 sets of back stuff. 3 times a week, that's 9 sets. It's a little low on the training volume. And then the fact that there's like only 1 shoulder and 1 chest exercise, you're getting only 3 sets, a maximum of 6 per week. I don't love that. I think that the training volume is pretty low. But honestly, guys, if I look at this routine, it's got my stamp of approval. It's pretty good. I'd switch up a little things, you know, a couple little things here. I also think this workout's going to be pretty short, you know, but it's not bad. Now, here's the thing. How would I make this better for fat loss? Because here's what I'm seeing if I look at this routine. They're doing the first exercise, they take 60 seconds of rest, they go back, they do set number 2, they take another 60 seconds of rest, they go back and they do set number 3, and then they take 60 seconds worth of rest. That's fine if I'm going for strength. You know, I wouldn't be doing an isometric for strength. I'd probably switch this up at that point. Probably do like a weighted setup of some type, or, you know, toes to bar, or, you know, something more difficult like that. If I'm going to do straight sets, same thing with like the kettlebell swing. I need to make sure that like rep number, you know, I'm like at 11 and I can barely make it to 12, right? If I'm going to take 60 seconds of rest. Inverted row, you know, yeah, I need to barely make it if I'm going to take 60 seconds of rest. But if I've got a client who's obese, my priority is to ensure that they are burning as many calories as possible. So you know what I can do to absolutely torch the calorie burn in this workout? That's very, very simple. I can do it as a circuit. I'm just going to go right here and I'm going to delete the rest. So now they're going to do the plank. They're not going to wait for the next set. They're going to go straight into their first set of kettlebell swings. They're going to go into their first set of inverted rows, their first set of goblet squats, and their first dumbbell chest press. They'll take 60 seconds of rest and then go back up to the top and repeat. And now I've done 2 things. I've made this workout much more efficient because I'm still getting my strength training in, but now I am just consistently moving the entire time rather than taking a lot of rest. I have upped the calorie intake, because what's going to normally happen is the heart rate will go up during the exercise and then it'll come down during the rest, and it'll go up during the exercise and down during the rest. In this version, it's going to go up and it's just going to stay there, and then eventually it'll come down during the rest, which means my calorie burn is going to increase massively. And now, because I'm doing this as a circuit, you know, let's just say, and it wouldn't take this long, but let's say like we go back to the original version of this, 3 sets of everything, this would take, and let's say it takes 1 minute per exercise, right? So that's basically 2 minutes per exercise, because it's 1 minute plus the rest, right? So now that's 2, 4, so that's 6 minutes here, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30 minutes of strength training, 30 minutes worth of sets originally. But now I've cut that down almost perfectly in half. You know, maybe it takes 15 seconds to transition, then there's a 60-second rest at the end. So I'd say this circuit will now take maybe 20 minutes. You know, I've cut maybe a little bit less than that, maybe like 18 minutes, right? Let's see, it's 3, 6, 9, 12. That'd be 18, 24. Yeah, about 24 minutes to get through this entire circuit now from 45. You know, that's a substantial cut down. So you know what I can do is I can just create like another circuit that matches with this, right? And then suddenly down here, I create sort of the anti-version. Instead of planks, let's do Supermans. Instead of a kettlebell swing, let's do, I mean, they got goblet squats in there. Let's do an RDL. Instead of an inverted row, let's do a seated row. Instead of a goblet squat, let's do a step up. And instead of dumbbell chest press, let's do push-ups. Right. So now I got the exact same, like, you know, situation, except I'm going to do 48 minutes of work instead of 45. Right. And now I'm going to get twice as many exercises. If we look at our training volume now, we just doubled it. Right. So if I did this 3 days per week, that's going to be, you know, 3, 6, 9 sets. That's 18 sets now, which is exactly in the middle of what we want to see. Actually, it's on the higher end, which is great for what we see in muscle growth. Ideally, we want to be somewhere between 10 and 20 sets per body part per week. All I had to do was do a circuit style training, right? Now, here's the thing. some of you might be out there thinking like, oh, well, what about me? Like I want to be a bodybuilder. I'm trying to increase my muscle mass, right? Circuit training still increases muscle mass, but it does burn a massive amount of calories as well, which can be problematic if you're trying to create a calorie surplus. If you're trying to gain muscle mass, you need to be in a calorie surplus. On a routine like this, you would actually need to eat more in order to really gain that mass. But that's why generally bodybuilders do straight sets until they're going into like a cut for competition where you want to trim down and you start doing circuit training. Yeah, what's up, Marjan? Question.
I asked for weight loss. If like in this category you just told us, I wanted to know, like, is it cardio is better to do like in the beginning of it or after the end of it?
Sure. Classic question. Yeah. What should you do first? If you're going to compare, let's say you pair this up, right? Because let's say you don't want to do this. Let's say no,
if we want to do this, exactly. Do we have to do the cardio before, or we don't need the cardio anymore?
So here's the thing. This is cardio. This is going to feel like cardio.
Okay.
So this kind of counts, right? Obviously I don't have a warm up in here, but like, if we were doing the NASM approach, we would put our SMR here, we do a little bit of foam rolling, we do our stretches here, right? And then we would do just like a cardiovascular warm up on like, anything we want. Let's say it's a recumbent bike. And then, for 5 minutes, right? Like NASM does want you to get your body temperature up for 5 minutes before you get into your strength training, just to make sure that nothing is at risk of pulling, right?
Okay.
So in that case, it's like, yeah, do 5 minutes of cardio, but like, I don't consider a 5-minute warm up on the treadmill cardio, I imagine what you're talking about is like, let's say you're going to go walk up on a treadmill, do an incline for 30 minutes, right? Yeah. Should you do that first, or should you do that second, or can you skip it?
Or after the end of the training?
So the typical approach is people will say you should do your strength first, your cardio second. Okay. Here's what I'll say. The reason people say that is because you always want to get your high intensity work out of the way first. That should always be at the top of your workout. So to use something that's analogous to that, let's say you're doing a heavy barbell squat and you're going to do some walking lunges and you're going to do like a step up to balance and you're going to do calf presses, right? So that's going from like the biggest muscles like your squat into slightly smaller, into slightly smaller, into slightly smaller, right? You wouldn't do bicep curls before doing pull-ups. You would do pull-ups, right? Then bicep curls, because you're going to go from big to small. You want to go from intense to less intense, right? So we want to do strength before we do cardio, because that's our more intense part of the workout. Cardio is not very intense. Cardio can be hard, but it's not intense most times, unless it's like full-on sprints. Now, here's what I'll say. I think that scientifically, that's the best. Like, we look at like the physiology of it. And if I've got somebody who's going to follow my routine perfectly, that is what I recommend. If I've got somebody who like is going to listen to every word I say and not argue and do it exactly as I write it down, yep, I'm going to put cardio second. But some people like cardio. Some people like need to get like warmed in. They need to like get locked into their workout. So, I find that cardio is either your favorite thing or your least favorite thing. Like my buddy Josh, he would rather run 3 miles than do 10 push-ups. Like he does not like strength training. And so if I can entice him to get him into the gym and look forward to going to the gym by like doing his cardio first, and then I can convince him afterwards to do his strength training. If that's how I have to do it, it may not be like physiologically sound, but if that gets Josh to do what I tell him to do 3 times a week, rather than him doing what I tell him to do once a week, then that's going to be the more effective routine. So there is a little bit of like conversation around what is scientifically best, which I think is strength first, cardio second, versus what is practically best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same thing is true, like here. Some of you guys, all you guys knows, but Marjan and Marvin, you guys might have caught something just now that I did, that sometimes like new students catch, and they're like, that seems weird. Where you do the stretching first, cardio second in your warm up. A lot of people go and they do 5 minutes on the treadmill to get their body warm. Then they go stretch, then they go work out. Did you guys pick up? Sometimes I get people who notice that.
Yeah, that's
and
that's
it's like,
why.
that seems weird. Like, why? Like, I like to, get my body warm before I stretch because I find my stretches are better. Yeah, actually, there's a lot of science behind that. And I think that's actually how I like to do it in the real world. That's how I like to do it. I always build my examples the way NASM does. But the way I do things, I cardio first, stretch second. Cardio, warm up first, stretch second. But the reason they do that is because theoretically, you want to be loose and learn how to be loose before you do any physical activity, because that is theoretically safer. I don't consider a 5-minute walk on the treadmill to be dangerous in any capacity. But I guess theoretically it could be. So that's how NASM does it. So that's the way I teach it to you. But again, this is kind of an example of like what is scientifically best, which in my opinion, I think scientifically it's actually better to cardio than stretch. But NASM believes that it's more practical to stretch than cardio than lift. So, that's the NASM approach. But to answer just black and white your question, easiest way to answer it is do your strength first, do your cardio second.
Okay.
However, this is basically
you.
the whole thing. This is cardio and strength together, which is great. Now, one of our other recommendations for clients who are obese, we want to try to increase their lean muscle mass. You might notice that this routine has like a little bit of core, legs, upper back, legs, and chest. Trainers, we freaking love legs. What's the deal? Why so much leg work? Well, part of the reason is that your leg work, number one, burns the most calories. It's 60% of the muscle in your body. So because like 60% of all the muscle you have is from your waist down. I know it doesn't look like it, by the way. You look at like how much stuff is up here. But there's like, in terms of muscle mass, like strip all your muscles and just throw them into a bin, and upper body and lower body. The lower body bin will weigh more. It's just, they're larger. And so they burn the most calories. So that's already very beneficial. But the other thing is, it's a great place to hide muscle. I am not a believer that women should worry about getting bulky, but I hear it all the time. I'm like, oh, I don't want to look too bulky. Like, trust me, ladies, that's not going to happen. It's very, very difficult to put on muscle mass in such a way that will look bulky. But let's say you're worried about it. Great. Let's put some muscle on the legs. You're never going to see it. There's so much of it that a 5% increase looks the same. So it's a great place to hide pounds and pounds of muscle. And just look at what happens. I know for those of you who have been through our weight loss program design class, we go to like a BMR calculator that takes into account body fat percentage. So we use what's called the Catch-McArdle formula. Let's say we got a 30-year-old client who's female, 5'10", who weighs 200 pounds, right? And they have currently like 25% body fat. It'd need to be higher than that. Let's say 30% body fat. They calculate here. They're going to burn 1,742 calories per day, just living a normal everyday life. Now, let's say they drop weight to 190 pounds, but their body fat percentage is still 30%. If I hit calculate here, their calorie burn goes from 1,700. What was it? 1742. What was it? 1742 down to 1673. That's a substantial drop. That's a drop of 70 calories, but let's say they go down to 190 pounds, but they lost 10 pounds, but then they lost, let's say 3% body fat. So they're at 27% body fat now. I hit calculate, it's back up to 1729. That's a substantial difference, right? So we know that like maintaining our lean body mass helps us burn more calories, which is going to help with the overall weight loss. Obviously, it's going to make us stronger, which is great and more efficient. Circuit style exercise is a really good way to burn lots of calories and build muscle. You know, it's not the best way to build muscle. Best way to build muscle is straight sets, but straight sets don't get the calorie burn. So we're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. And then when it comes to choosing your exercises, you probably want to choose exercises in a standing or at least a seated position. So if I go back to this routine here and I look at something like the plank, right? A plank, if I've got an obese client trying to do a plank, that's a lot of stress on the low back, and they have to get all the way down to the floor in order to do it, which could be very inconvenient. So I don't love that for my client. So I'm going to make an adjustment here. Rather than doing a plank, I'm going to do a resistance and lateral hold. Okay. If you want to know what that is, a resistance band lateral hold is kind of like a standing side plank. No, come on, internet. There it is. So this is actually, he's actually doing a Pavlov press. There we go. So she's going to go like this, right? She's doing a wood chopper. I could change this to a wood chopper, but I wanted to keep the isometric. So I would start with maybe just a hold, and I can have my client walk laterally while still holding. This band's trying to twist back this way, but they're staying here laterally, and then they walk back, and then they walk this way, and they walk this way, right? And what that's going to do is they're resisting and, they're anti-twisting. So it's a really good core stabilization exercise. And then down here for my other one, I might go with the Pavlov press. Right? And the Pavlov press is another really good one where, again, you hold, but you're just moving your arms, but the band's going this way. So it's trying to twist, and I'm resisting that twist, right? Kettlebell swing, that's nice and upright. I love that one. I think that's great. Inverted row, that's upright. They're literally going to walk under a bar and pull themselves up. So that's very good. Goblet squat, that's very upright. Dumbbell chest press is okay. That's laying down on a bench, right? But I could probably keep them standing and burn even more calories because I'm on my feet by doing a standing cable chest press, right? That standing cable chest press, which was our pushing pulling assessment exercise, is going to burn more calories because it's in a standing position. Cool. Let's go down to the next one. I got the Pavlov press, RDL, seated row. It's still seated upright and it's free sitting, so I don't hate that one. Step up is really good. And then I will say push-ups on the ground, probably not so much. Let's do incline push-ups instead. So that way they're in a standing position, going down. Plus, that's actually probably, if my client really is obese and has a hard time getting to the floor, that's probably the right level of difficulty too. Full-on push-ups might have been a little bit far-reaching. So all I did was make a slight adjustment to get a couple extra calories burned by keeping my client on their feet. And then when it comes to our assessments, we're gonna generally focus on pushing assessments, pulling assessments, and squatting. Single leg balance is obviously big. All the regular assessments that we see. I didn't even put that in the notes because it's all the standard ones. Now I will say self myofascial release. So if you are building like a little bit of foam rolling up here, be cautious with this. You might not actually do foam rolling. You might just do some other form of SMR, maybe like a Theracane. Remember the Theracane is that like cane that you can use to kind of like, myofascial release, or like a lacrosse ball on the wall, or like a tiger tail is a really good option, because then okay, this one I always do that. But these little like sticks that you can use to like roll, or a rolling pin even, that kind of stuff is going to be much more helpful because then our client doesn't have to hold their body weight up, put pressure on their wrist, get down to the floor, get back up, all those things. And then be cautious of placing your client face down or face up because oftentimes they will, I mean, if they're obese and don't have any problems with blood pressure, then it's fine. You can bring them face down, you bring them face up, don't worry about it. But one of the things we're going to see tomorrow when we look at hypertension, high blood pressure, it's really important to keep your client's head upright. Bringing them down, bringing them up can cause them to get dizzy, and we don't want to do that. So we need to be aware of that because that is common amongst clients who fall into the obesity category. And then lastly, we are going to focus particularly on phases 1 and 2. That's one more thing where, these exercises here were just kind of picked at random. They're not meant to be in any category, but I would probably choose stabilization versions of these things. So the lateral hold works, but a kettlebell swing is a power exercise. So I'd probably instead do like a single leg RDL, right? Which I've got an RDL down here. So I probably now need to do just like a single leg squat touchdown, right? Instead of an inverted row actually works. Goblet squat, I might do that on a Bosu ball, right? And a standing cable chest press is plenty unstable. Seated row is pretty stable. I'd put that in the strength category. So maybe instead do a standing cable row, which would be unstable. Step up, we would just change to a step up to balance. And the incline push-ups is unstable, so that falls into the stabilization category. So now it's a phase 1 workout, right? We got pretty far off from what we sort of originally started with, but we built a stabilization routine. And again, Marvin and Marjan, we will go over what that means, like stabilization exercises and strength exercises and power exercises. We'll go over that in the next course. It's coming down the line. But we built a stabilization routine. We did it as a circuit. We kept our client on their feet for the most part the entire time to maximize calorie burn. And it's still going to build plenty of strength. It's going to build plenty of muscle. So this is a pretty decent fat loss routine. And, we did it, the amount of time I actually worked on this was probably 5 minutes. Obviously, I need to make sure that I'm putting an actual warm up together. Probably should move these core exercises into NASM's movement prep section if we're being clear about it. I might even do some SAQ if it's fun. My client wants to do that. And then I need to build my cool down. But in terms of just the overall resistance section, we did, pretty decent work. So here's our table with all the rules. You're going to see that we kind of fell within this, I believe. We want to choose low impact exercises for the mode. So if we are going to do cardio, it should be treadmill walking rather than running, rowing machine or stationary cycling. My favorite of that is probably going to be the treadmill walking, but I'm also very biased because that's closest to running. Rowing machines are also really, really great. Stationary cycling, I think, is probably really good if your client needs the low impact, but you're saving some calories there by, being off your feet. Frequency, we're going for at least 5 days per week. We are trying to get physically active regularly. We want this person to build up their endurance and, adopt this overall lifestyle change. So our frequency is relatively high there. Not as high as like a kid, but still relatively high. Intensity should be 60 to 80% of max heart rate. Now, you'll notice that we didn't focus on VO2 here. We're actually not focusing on the actual oxygen consumption because of just a heavy body pressing down on those lungs. So generally, we're going to focus on heart rate instead. That's going to be a little bit easier to monitor, or we're going to use the talk test. So remember, we have 3 different versions of the talk test. There's the I can hold a conversation very easily. I can hold a conversation uncomfortably, and I cannot talk, right? That's zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So we're probably going to keep our clients somewhere between zone 1 and 2. They shouldn't really ever get fully out of breath, but they should be breathing relatively hard. Duration is 40 to 60 minutes a day. If your client cannot handle that, they can do 20 to 30 minutes twice a day. I think that's a really effective way to do it. If I had a client, like I said, this was 24 minutes, right? This little circuit here. So if my client, let's say I get rid of this, right? And they just do this section here. If they did that for 24 minutes in the morning before they go to work, and then later that day, when they get home for work, they go for a 30-minute walk or a 20-minute walk, great. Guess what? That's still going to burn a ton of calories. That's going to help with weight loss. And it's breaking it up, so it might not be too hard on the body. So they don't have to like mentally jump over this hurdle of a 60-minute commitment. And they don't have to jump over this hurdle of just like everything difficult all at once per day. That could be an easier way for them to adopt that into their lifestyle. Like I can't mentally do these like 90-minute sessions like I used to. When I was like more into, body composition and bodybuilding, like when I was in my early 20s and stuff, I used to do it just like anybody else did. I go hit the gym and like do the strength and like work really hard. And then I would do like, when I was on a cut, I would do like massive amounts of cardio afterwards. And like, they'd be these like 2-hour gym sessions. I can't wrap my head around that anymore. I got crap to do. Like when I worked in the gym, it was fine. I'd finish up my sessions, go straight there, and then burn through a bunch of money because I was always eating at the snack bar because I never, never planned ahead as an early 20-year-old. But now, like, it's like, I don't have time for that, right? So it's much more easy for me to kind of break down this idea of like, maybe I can do a little bit in the morning and a little bit afterwards, It just depends on what's practical for your client. Scientifically, by the way, they're the same. Assessments: push-pull, overhead squat, single leg balance, single leg squat if possible. When it comes to flexibility training, you want to mainly focus on the types of self-myofascial release that can be tolerated. So foam rolling might not actually be an option here. Instead, the Theracane, the Tiger Tail, right? And then we can follow the regular flexibility continuum. So we can do static stretches, active stretches, and dynamic, depending on what level your client is in. And then special considerations, always make sure that you're, resistance training, 1 to 3 sets, somewhere between 10 and 15 repetitions, 2 to 3 days per week. So we fell definitely directly within the middle of that. 12 reps, 3 sets, 12 reps there. And then make sure your client's comfortable, guys. Always keep that in account. I've definitely had clients, obese clients, they just don't feel comfortable in the gym. They feel like they don't belong, which is ridiculous. But like, it's a feeling that a lot of people deal with. Senior clients who don't feel like they belong. It's a place for everybody. This is why places like Planet Fitness are so popular, and I don't, like, people make fun of Planet Fitness, and I think that is the stupidest thing in the world. Planet Fitness is great. I think it's weird that they have Pizza Fridays. I think that's a weird thing to do, for a gym. But they're trying to create an atmosphere that draws people in. And if they do that more successfully than Equinox, then they're the better gym. Like, if they are putting out more good in the world, that's all I care about, So make sure your client is comfortable. Find a way. If you get exercise in a more private section of the gym, fine. Who cares? And then your exercise should be performed in mostly a seated, or if you can do it, a standing position. Now, like I said, some obese clients are going to be dealing with things like PAD, which is peripheral arterial disease, or hypertension. Being on their feet can be painful after a while. So you do have to kind of weigh that as well. Priority is to keep your client comfortable. So if they can't handle being on their feet, that's fine. We can make that adjustment later. All right, so there's our first one. Any questions, comments, or concerns on that, guys? How y'all feeling?
Nope, I'm feeling pretty good.
Cool. Love it. Let's take a look at diabetes. I always think of, do you guys remember those old Wilford Brimley commercials? He's the guy from, he was the guy who was in, oh God, what was that movie? The Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Anyway, he would always do those commercials for diabetes, and he would always say diabetes. like that was his big thing. Like, I have type 2 diabetes. Anyway, diabetes is, like I said, it's going to fall into two categories, but either way, it is impaired glucose control. So this is either you are impaired because your pancreas isn't making enough insulin. So that's type 1 diabetes. We call that insulin dependent diabetes. Ironically, both of them are dependent, but this is the one that this is sort of the original diabetes. And so your body isn't producing enough insulin, right? So what ends up happening is because you don't produce enough insulin, you end up with high blood sugar. We call that hyperglycemia. That's excessive sugar in your blood, and it screws up your entire metabolism. Your body can't heal tissue very well. It can't transmit oxygen very well. It really can't do any of the things that it really needs to be able to do because there's just a bunch of sugar gumming up the works. In my brain, I literally, whenever I think of diabetes, I literally just picture what if my house was just filled with a dump truck's worth of sugar? I would just be very inconvenient. I just can't do any of my normal stuff. I'm wading through, sand, that's kind of what having diabetes is like. It's your body just can't metabolize properly. And then what can happen is eventually, you can end up with low blood sugar levels because you end up burning a massive amount of energy. And so then your pancreas ends up dropping your blood sugar levels really low, because the thing about type 1 diabetes is that your pancreas is not working. Your pancreas is in charge of making insulin, but it also makes another hormone called glucagon, and glucagon is exactly the opposite of insulin. Insulin drives sugar out of your blood into your glycogen. Glucagon tells your glycogen stores to release sugar back into your bloodstream. So if you have a bunch of stored glycogen, and you make a bunch of glucagon, that glycogen will leave your stores and enter your bloodstream to be used for energy. So that can result in low blood sugar levels because you're not making any glucagon. So if you do have glycogen stores, they just stay filled and they just don't move, right? That's type 1 diabetes. So both hyper and hypoglycemia are side effects of this impaired pancreas. So this is sometimes referred to as childhood diabetes because this is where it's usually where they notice it is when you're a kid. And so that's sort of the original name for it there. Now there is also type 2 diabetes, which is the insulin resistant diabetes, also known as adult onset diabetes. And this is where your cells have actually become resistant to insulin. So you make plenty of it, but it just doesn't work anymore, right? And so that is associated with heart disease. Again, your heart is not getting oxygen delivery. Nerve disease like neuropathy, that's probably the most common one that we tend to see. Kidney problems, circulatory problems, and even problems in the eyes like glaucoma is associated with diabetes as well. So chronic blood sugar can damage your nerves. We call that neuropathy. It can damage your kidneys because it has to process all this extra junk that's in there. And it can result in glaucoma, which is obviously not awesome. So I do want to show you guys a quick video to kind of just show you what resistance sort of looks like. So if we look at how body so here's an interesting actually, you know what, so I'm gonna break it down. Yeah, here's a different one because I showed this video in the weight loss class. So here's what happens to your brain, how caffeine actually works inside your body. There's a little bit of a risk. I've never showed this video before. I have not watched.
With its stimulating effects, it's easy to understand why coffee is the second most traded commodity on Earth after oil. For many, it keeps us awake and moving through our busy days. But how does it work? What exactly does coffee do to your brain? Whenever you're awake, a chemical called adenosine slowly accumulates in your brain, and this adenosine binds to receptors which slow down brain activity. Ultimately, the more adenosine there is, the more tired your brain feels, which makes sense as the longer you're awake, the more fatigued you become. Conversely, while you sleep, the concentration of adenosine declines, gradually promoting wakefulness. But it turns out that the caffeine in your coffee is incredibly similar to adenosine in structure. The caffeine works its way through your bloodstream and into your brain, where it starts to compete and binds with adenosine receptors. But because it's not adenosine, the sleepiness effect isn't felt. Adenosine can no longer bind, meaning its calming properties are diminished, which is great for you when you're feeling tired. However, with long-term use of caffeine, your brain responds by creating more adenosine receptors, which means more caffeine is required to elicit the same response. It also means that when you try to quit drinking coffee or miss your daily intake, you might experience some withdrawal symptoms and feel more tired than you would have before you ever drank coffee. But the caffeine doesn't stop there. It also stimulates the production of adrenaline, you know, the fight or flight hormone. This increases your heart rate, gets your blood pumping, and even opens up your airways. Furthermore, it affects dopamine levels by preventing its reabsorption in the brain, which makes you feel happy. In fact, this is the exact same thing that cocaine does, just to a lesser degree. It's a drug after all. This dopamine stimulation is also the aspect of coffee that makes it moderately addictive. So, can you drink too much coffee? It turns out there is a lethal dose of caffeine, which is somewhere around 150 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of your body. This means if you weigh 70 kilograms, you would require 14,000 milligrams of caffeine to overdose. Put into perspective, an average cup of coffee contains roughly 150 milligrams of caffeine, meaning if you're 70 kilograms, approximately 70 cups of coffee would kill you. However, you'd have to drink those cups all at once, making it effectively impossible to overdose on caffeine from coffee, since you wouldn't be able to physically fit that much in your stomach. You would also start experiencing mania and hallucinations before getting to this point. Caffeine also has a half-life of around 6 hours, so if you drank a standard coffee with around 150 milligrams of caffeine, after about 6 hours there'll only be 75 milligrams left in your system and you'll be feeling half of the effect, and 6 hours after that you'll have 37.5 milligrams, leaving more room for adenosine to jump back into action, which is why you may reach for another cup throughout the day to maintain that glorious, alert, and energetic feeling. So drink up and enjoy the buzz while it lasts. And for all of you in school, while we know caffeine is key, so are good deals on textbooks.
All right. So that's kind of a fun one, right? Like basically your body, because there's so much caffeine, makes new receptors, and then it takes more and more and more caffeine in order to give you the same effect, because you have to fill up those receptors. Now, diabetes is not perfectly like that. That's actually where your receptors just simply become less sensitive to it because they've been exposed to it so often. It's a little bit different, but it's a very similar situation, which is why you do want to watch your caffeine intake in the same way that you want to watch your sugar intake. Even though as a chemical, I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with just caffeine by itself. That being said, often the way we consume caffeine is with lots of cream and lots of sugar, which adds a lot of unhealthy calories and other materials. So be cautious with the coffee. So special considerations, if we've got a client who is diabetic, what adjustments are we going to make? Well, we're going to see a target goal of about 1,000 to 2,000 calories burned through exercise per week. So if you can actually track how many calories your client is burning through understanding what their body weight is and things like that, we want to burn somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 calories worth of, 1,000 to 2,000 calories worth of energy burned through exercise per week, right? So imagine if you're burning 500 calories per workout, 4 days a week. Great, there you go. Or maybe you burn 250 calories per workout and you exercise like 6 days per week. That's about 1,500 calories. If you can do that, and that's only 250 calories from exercise, that's not really that much. That's probably a 45-minute workout. That is going to be enough to really empty out your glycogen stores. So this is a very unique way that we're looking at things. Normally we're looking at calorie burns to create like a deficit, right? But in this case here, we are actually paying attention particularly to how many calories we burn during the workout, because what we care about with a client who has diabetes is we are trying to empty out their glycogen stores. so that their body has a reason to fill them back up, and it will resensitize them to that insulin. Because the reason their body's becoming less sensitive to insulin is because like it has nowhere to go. It doesn't have anywhere to put that sugar because the glycogen stores can only store so much. Your liver's only so big. Your muscles only have so much capacity to store. So we do want to make sure that we're encouraging our diabetic clients to measure their glucose levels before and after exercise. We don't want our clients' blood sugar levels to drop through the floor and then have them like get nauseous or pass out on us. And we also don't want to make sure their blood sugar levels are too high to where they'll get really sick during their workout. And then we also want to encourage them when it comes to carbohydrate consumption to consume mostly complex carbohydrates. So when you look at that, you know, we are talking about things like whole grains, fruits and vegetables that have the skin still on them, right? Rather than simple carbohydrates, which are going to be, you know, like milk is actually a simple carbohydrate for the most part. There's a lot of sugar in milk. These fruits here, cheese is not a simple carbohydrate. That should not be on there. Cheese is actually very complex. There we go. Let's look at this picture here. So like soda, we want to avoid things like that, right? Like if you get like a piece of bread, right? And it's like Wonder Bread, which has a lot of extra sugar dumped into it to make it taste a little bit sweeter. You know, we're going to see total carbohydrates, 29 grams with 5 grams of sugar in it, right? Versus like but it's also only going to have 110 calories. It's not too bad, you know? Now let's take a look at like a piece of whole grain bread nutrition. We'll take a look at like a slice of whole grain bread. Holy cow, it actually has more calories in it. That's not good, right? That might make you think that we should put the emphasis on like the Wonder Bread if we're only paying attention to calories, right? But the difference is, actually, I'm gonna go ahead and take back what I said. This is actually not a good example. I might have pulled up the wrong bread here. I didn't exactly vet this properly. Give me some whole grain stuff, guys. That's still not better. Interesting. I'm seeing a lot of, yeah, here we go. All right, this will work. So here's the same number of calories, basically the same amount of carbohydrates, but the difference is more sugar and no fiber versus less sugar and more fiber. Fiber is one of the ways that we slow down carbohydrate absorption inside of our diet. So if we can intake complex carbs, our blood sugar is going to come up slowly rather than spiking. Because if it's already a simple carbohydrate, it's already broken down, it can just go straight into the bloodstream. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We do want to use weight-bearing exercise cautiously. And what we mean by that is like any type of lifting with a diabetic client, you do want to be a little cautious and make sure that they are wearing the appropriate footwear. We do not want our client to get blisters from doing cardio, you know, like treadmill walking or something like that, because if they do have neuropathy, they might not become aware that they have a blister. They have nerve damage due to that excessive sugar, and that nerve damage might result in them being unaware that they have like a cut or a bruise or a blister or something like that, and then it can get infected. And because their body heals much more slowly as well, they may end up with you know, like a lesion that, you know, that could result in amputation at some point even. So you got to be really careful with that. This is actually why with any client who has neuropathy, you need to pay attention to what they are wearing and make sure that they are not putting themselves at risk for getting like blisters. You know, like my girlfriend and I went to Disneyland recently, and like she gets blisters every time she goes to Disneyland because we walk like crazy, you know. And so if she was a diabetic, I would be like, hey, I need you, you know, keep checking your feet, like, you know. Luckily she's not, but like that can definitely be a risk factor. So make sure you're using it cautiously, always pay attention and encourage them to wear the appropriate stuff, moisture wicking socks, shoes that with a wide toe box, things like that. And then just be aware, guys, that like as they continue exercising, they are resensitizing themselves to insulin. So, you know, I've had this happen multiple times with clients that I've had over the years. They'll start saying like they feel really lethargic, and you know they're starting to like kind of struggle with like you know their energy levels throughout the day. And so I'll encourage them. I'm like, hey, you know, make sure you are checking in with your doctor. You may need to lower your insulin. You know, you may need less of it than you needed before. You may need less of your medication. That's awesome. You know, that's exactly what we want in our clients. But make sure that they are talking to their doctor about that. So for mode, we're going to choose low impact stuff. Again, we're trying to avoid any blisters and stuff like that. Rowing, stationary cycling, those are really good examples. Frequency is 4 to 7 days per week here. It depends on how they're doing it. You're going to see like 4 to 7 is a weird, like wide range, but it's because look at the intensity here. You know, sometimes it might be as low as 50%, or we can take it even up to 90% heart rate max. Now, if you are going really high on the intensity, then your frequency is probably pretty low. But if your intensity is pretty low, well, then your frequency can be pretty high. So it can be effective when working with a diabetic to do walking 6 days a week, or it can be effective to do sprints, like really intense sprints. You just need to make sure that like if they have a comorbidity like obesity or something like that, sprints are high impact. So you do need to be cautious there. But we do see kind of a wide range here. Really all that means is like the world is your oyster, you know, again, 20 to 60 minutes, that's also a wide range, right? Honestly, most diabetic clients you can treat as a completely regular client and push them really hard. You just need to make sure that the other things that they may be dealing with aren't going to be affected by that. Assessments, totally normal. Push, pull, overhead squat, single leg balance, single leg squat, totally normal. Flexibility continuum, also totally normal. You can go through it the entire thing. Static stretches, active stretches, dynamic stretches, whichever one's most appropriate, depending on what level of training you are in with your client. And then generally anywhere from 1 to 3 sets, 10 to 15 repetitions. So that's like moderate intensity. We're not getting super high intensity. I actually somewhat disagree with this. I would say if you've got a diabetic client and you do want to go for high intensity, you can drop those reps down to like 6. But generally the reason we like 10 to 15 is because if you look at the duration of that, like let's say it's 4 seconds per lift, right? 4 seconds per rep. You know, that's 40 seconds there or 60 seconds there, which for those of you who have been through our physiology class, you guys know that 60 seconds, 40 to 60, that's like right in the middle of glycolysis, which glycolysis burns carbohydrates, which is really good for our diabetic clients. So while I think you could take the reps down to 6 very safely with a diabetic client, 10 to 15 rep is right in the sweet zone for sugar burning, which is great, you know. And then, like I said, special considerations, make sure they have the appropriate footwear. Always have a snack handy. If your client, you know, I've had clients make the mistake of like, you know, they just get slammed in the morning, they run out of time. And then they take their insulin a little too close to the training session, and then their blood sugar levels just fall through the floor mid-session, so they get like a little woozy. Make sure you have a snack handy so you can get those blood sugar levels back to neutral. And then use SMR with special care. So foam rolling can sometimes cause bruising, and if your client is a diabetic, they are going to bruise a little more easily, again, due to that decreased metabolism. You know, their metabolism's not functioning quite as well as it should. So foam rolling can be a little bit high risk here. A lot of times I will skip the rolling and go straight to the stretching with my diabetic clients. Any questions, guys? You guys feel good about diabetes? Comments, concerns? Doesn't seem like it. All right. Let's talk about how to work with prenatal clients. So let's say we got a client who is
Wait, actually, I have a question.
Yeah, please. What's up, Danny?
When you say we have to make sure when we work with somebody with neuropathy, we have to make sure they were in the appropriate stuff like shoes, socks. You're talking about like, for example, for even somebody is not diabetic but has a neuropathy. We have to recommend it to wear like diabetic shoes.
So they can wear like diabetic shoes, but just like if you are going to like do like cardio, like running socks that are actually like moisture wicking in particular, and they keep the sweat out. The less sweat you have or pooling in like your shoes and in your feet, the less likely you are to get a blister because it's like wet fabric rubbing on skin. Like that's what we're trying to avoid. So you can find like if you can see these are all like running socks. That's actually very helpful. So actually you're even seeing here, it's like avoid cotton at all costs. You should make sure that, you know, if you're doing like a 3-mile run or something, but on hot or wet days, you'll find that like cotton absorbs a lot of water and that can easily cause blisters. And the blisters is what we're worried about. So that's definitely something, you know, I used to work at a resort where they would, like I said, they would do like a 2-hour hike. So our biggest seller in like the store that we had was just freaking socks, you know, moisture wicking socks.
Oh, okay.
So
thank you.
Yeah. And then just make sure you also have a shoe with a wide toe box. You know, a shoe that's not going to, you know, you can see here, and this is obviously not a workout shoe. Oh, actually, no, that's good, right? See how this kind of like bulges out here? That leaves room for the foot to spread. So that's actually what we're looking for there. You should be able to spread your toes out this way inside your shoe rather than what we see in a lot of modern shoes. See how pointy that is at the top versus how wide that is? We want wide. We don't want pointy.
Okay. Yeah, I was asking because when I was having neuropathy, the doctor didn't. I asked him, and he just told me, no, just make sure you use like not too tight shoes, and if you can use like sleeping shoes every time, it will be better.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing, like, right, like you'll like, and this is where I'm not going to disagree with the doctor. But like a doctor is going to give you the advice that, like, you know, he's an expert on. He knows that neuropathy, the thing is, like, we're an expert on like what exercise freaking does to feet, you know. Like I mean, like a couple weekends ago when I was in that you know, ultimate tournament, you know, I played 4 games, you know, each day. So 8 games of frisbee is, you know, you're in cleats. You know, I was really happy to have like my running socks in my cleats and stuff, but by the end of the day, like I had blisters all over the place, you know. And unfortunately, like my cleats actually are pretty narrow because they're soccer cleats. So, you know, it's just with experience, it's like experience in sports is going to give you a slightly different experience from a doctor. Doctor is going to give you the advice of like, yeah, you know, like be cautious with your toes and stuff. And he's right. But like, just not quite as familiar. Just like a doctor would say like, hey, you need to work out more, but they're not going to know what chest exercise is best for the upper pec versus the lower. You know what I mean? So let's take a look at pregnancy here. So here's the thing, special considerations for clients who are pregnant. They are going to have decreased oxygen availability. Shortness of breath is going to be a symptom of pregnancy, right? I've only worked, to be fair, like I've only had maybe 5 or 6 clients go through like a pregnancy while I've been working with them. So not like, you know, not a population that I have like put major emphasis on. However, if this is something that you feel like you can work on, and this is something that you want to like particularly work in, NASM has a women's fitness specialist certifications, the WFS. And this is one of those continuing education packages. It's only worth 1.3 CEU, so you would need to pair that with another 0.6 in order to finish off your recertification. But this is actually like, it's a cool certification out there, and it will actually cover prenatal training, which is great. So there's a lot of misconceptions. We do want to make sure that we are kind of dispelling some of those. But we do have a couple considerations for like a high risk pregnancy. If your client is older than 35, if they have had a history of miscarriages, if they are currently a diabetic, or if they have like a thyroid disorder, anemia, if they were previously obese, and if they just have a generally sedentary lifestyle. All of those things are considered high risk. So we do want to make sure that we are avoiding high impact exercise and we're being cautious. That being said, for the average woman, exercising during pregnancy is a very, very healthy thing to do. And even with high risk, it's still a very healthy exercise or healthy thing to do. We just want to make sure that they're not doing super high impact, high risk activities simultaneously. Burpees are probably out of the question, posture can affect blood flow during vigorous activity. Now, that doesn't mean that the infant is going to be at risk or anything like that. It just means that like there's going to be less blood flow to a particular area, which means that shortness of breath is going to be a problem. So we do want to be avoid prone or supine positions. We do not want to lay our client face down, and we do not want to lay them face up. Both of those positions are not only going to be uncomfortable, but also can affect that blood flow, which is something we are trying to avoid. But if you're worried about like temperature and stuff, that is nothing to worry about. Like I've had like, pregnant clients like be worried that like, their body temperature is going to spike as they're exercising, and that's going to be risky for the infant. Not at all. Don't get me wrong, it's going to be more uncomfortable, which is kind of a bummer. Ask any woman who's ever gone through pregnancy and they will tell you like, their body temperature is going to go up and down and up and down. It's going to go crazy, which will be uncomfortable during exercise and will cause like a lot of sweating and stuff. But is it going to put the infant at risk? Not at all. So even in the absence of exercise, you are going to still need to see an increase in the number of calories consumed. That's going to be about an average of 300 calories per day. So if we are looking at like what someone's basal calories are, we're going to probably increase that by about 300 calories per day, to feed a growing body. And then like I said, these considerations, the fears that like the fetus could be harmed through like increased circulation during exercise, not a thing. If we're worried that it can be harmed through like decreased oxygen supply because maybe like the mother is working really hard and exercising, and so all the oxygen's going there, that's not a thing. Don't have to worry about that. And then if we're worried about the idea that like body temperature is going to get too high, and then the baby is going to be cooked, I guess. Yeah, definitely not. We do not have to worry about all three of those things. In fact, exercise during pregnancy is a very, very, very safe thing to engage in, as long as it's done, for the most part, just upright. So the benefits, with already healthy, active people, they can continue that all the way into like their third trimester, and then they just make what we call a logical reduction based on their ability. Eventually certain exercises are simply going to get uncomfortable. Certain exercises are just not going to be fun to perform at certain levels, at certain stages of pregnancy. So we literally, NASM is just using the word a logical reduction. It's a gut feeling judgment call based on your part. Check in with your client, ask how comfortable they're feeling, and things like that. You're just going to make sure that, you're not pushing them too hard to where they're like, you know what, Julio, I hate this, I'm out of here. Like that's all you're doing. You're just making your reductions based on that. There's a lot less science in this one and a lot more just practical information, right? So the modes that are going to be most commonly used are probably low impact exercises. Maybe step aerobics, that are low impact, but we're just avoiding any jarring actions. We're not making our client do like squat jumps or box jumps or depth jumps or things like that. Treadmill walking, stationary cycling. Aqua aerobics can be really helpful because it's really fun and also takes some of the body weight off, which can just be very comfortable feeling. Frequency 3 to 5 days per week, just like your average client. Now, what's kind of funny here is because they can make some assumptions here. They're probably assuming that a pregnant client is somewhere between the ages of like 20 and like 35. We're actually getting specific like heart rate recommendations in this table. But like 140 to 160 is basically zone 1, depending on the age of your client. Like 160 probably for like an early 20-year-old, and then like 140 for a client who's closer to like 35. But that's your zone 1. You can basically just think of that as around 65% heart rate max. If we look at like a client who's like 220 minus, minus their age of, let's say, 20 years old, right, times 0.65, right, there's a heart rate of like 130. So that's actually a little bit low for this person. So I guess maybe they're taking up to 70, 200 times 0.7. Yeah, that's what it is. So they're going 70%. They're going right in the middle of zone 1 to zone 2, right? So that's not true. Sorry. Bottom of zone 1 to the top of zone 1. So 65 to 75%. The middle of that is 70%. So we say a heart rate of 140. I wouldn't think of it that way. Just think of zone 1 and run the numbers yourself, guys. Duration, we're probably going to keep it a little bit shorter. A lot of times, like, again, being on your feet during pregnancy can be pretty uncomfortable. The temperature changes can be pretty uncomfortable. All of that kind of compounds into somebody who probably doesn't want to do a full hour-long workout. So we're just going to say 15 to 30 minutes. Our assessments, if you are assessing for posture, you can do the push-pull overhead squat and single leg squat. However, like, assessing for posture when the body's posture is going to be naturally altered during pregnancy, to me, doesn't make a ton of sense. But those are the appropriate assessments there. In general, we're only going to do static or active stretching along with self-myofascial release. Simply avoiding dynamic exercises. Dynamic exercises, which involve like a lot of swinging and explosive movements, probably not recommended because they're high impact. Again, we're trying to avoid any of the high impact stuff. So butt kickers, high knees, things like that, not really recommended. Flexibility for, a pregnant client. 2 to 3 days per week, we're going to go light loads, probably 12 to 15 repetitions. So we're going to keep the repetitions high so we can keep the intensity low. And then our special considerations, we are avoiding face down or face up positions after the first trimester there. So those are definitely some considerations that we want to make, similar to our client who was obese, right? We don't want to lay them all the way down and lay them back up. So any questions on that one, guys?
No, I'm feeling pretty good over here.
Cool. All right, well, let's look at an example here. If I remember right, this person has them all. I think I tried to avoid this in most of our examples, but we were like, they could be obese and diabetic and pregnant at the same time. So I think this person, type 1 diabetes, yeah, first trimester, yeah. Okay, so here is our example person. This is our client, Diane. She is an accountant, so she works as a CPA, which is a pretty sedentary job that also, unfortunately, has lots of stress. And she often wears elevated shoes to work. She's in sort of a elevated heel situation, which is definitely going to cause some tightness in the calves. We're going to look for that later. Hobbies, she likes baking, particularly like desserts and stuff. Oh, I remember this. This is like we took a student in class. We took a student in class, and then we modified. So yeah, baking desserts in particular, watching movies, and then they like swimming. So that's kind of a fun one to remember. We can throw that into our routine. And they have been a diabetic for 10 years. So with that, they are taking insulin, metformin, things like that daily. And recently they got pregnant, and so they are in their first trimester. She's 35 years old. Her BMI is 32.4, so that does put her into the obesity category. Weight is currently 264 pounds, and a waist to hip ratio of 0.95. Now, I haven't talked too much about waist to hip ratio this module, but we did the circumference measurements here. Narrowest part of the waist, widest part of the hips, found that that ratio is falling outside of normal ranges. So that does put us at increased risk of diabetes, heart disease, things like that. During the overhead squat, we did see the arms fall forward, and sure enough, with that elevated heels, we saw the feet turn out. She's got some tight calf muscles that we want to work on. We did the pushing and pulling assessment, and we also found a forward head posture. These two here make a lot of sense considering that our client works in a very sedentary situation with a lot of stress. So she's probably spending a lot of her day like this, you know, like very stressed out. And also her blood pressure is currently 135/85. So that's also pre-hypertensive. So we got a lot of work to do here, you know. We're seeing a lot of these common comorbidities start to creep up, likely from, you know, an excessive BMI. Is it causing it directly? No, but I would say the same habits that are causing an excessive BMI are the same habits that are, you know, leading to, you know, or this stressful lifestyle is leading, you know, it's all tied together, right? So we're going to do the overhead squat, pushing and pulling. We saw what happened. We saw the results from that. We did skip the cardio assessment for now. It's, you know, it's a relatively high impact. We know that we've got things to work on anyways, and we know that we're not going to take her intensity into zones 2 or 3 because she's pregnant anyways. So we don't really have to do the cardio assessment for now. Body mass index and blood pressure, we're going to keep an eye on those. So we're going to do resistance training 3 days a week with 2 minutes of like a 30-minute swim on her off days. So that's a Monday through Friday schedule, right? Her strength training, we're going to try to keep that to 30-minute sessions. That way she's not going to get too uncomfortable. 12 to 15 repetitions of 2 to 3 sets, following the same recommendations from obesity, diabetes, and pregnancy there. So that's actually going to be the same. We're going to go with a low to moderate intensity, obviously, and we're going to focus on compound or isolation exercises. We're not really putting any special emphasis on like total body, just because those can be a little bit higher impact. We're just going to say like multi-joint or single joint exercises for the most part here. Cardiovascular training, like I said, 2 days a week, 30 minutes in the pool. And in terms of like her getting her heart rate up, because monitoring her heart rate is probably going to be pretty difficult without a waterproof watch, she should be able to hold a conversation the entire time. That's what we're going to tell her. You know, it's like, hey, you shouldn't really be fully out of breath, but you should be breathing a little bit harder, but be able to hold a conversation the whole time. In terms of her stretches, we are going to do static stretches because she's in the beginning stages here. We're going to focus on the lats, pecs, and internal rotators, as well as her gastrocnemius and soleus for those tight calf muscles, and a little bit for the biceps femoris and TFL, because it's not just tight calf muscles going this way, it's also a little bit of external rotation. So that lateral hamstring muscle, that lateral hip muscle, both of those are external rotators. So we're going to work on those. For her special considerations, we are going to encourage her to go buy some good athletic shoes with a wide toe box. That is going to help make sure that her feet can spread, especially with pregnancy. Also, like water retention tends to be a problem. So that's going to be very helpful, and also going to put her less at risk for, you know, friction and blisters and things like that. We're going to encourage her in her overall lifestyle to park further away when she goes to the grocery store. That way she can increase that caloric burn naturally throughout the day. And when it comes to food, we are going to encourage a food journal as well as an increase in the uptake of complex carbs. So we can work with her and analyze that food journal regularly and say like, hey, this is a really good meal schedule, but I've got a couple swaps that I think would be really helpful if you want to consider taking them. That's regular pasta. What if we change that to whole wheat pasta? right? That is, you know, apple slices with like caramel. What if we swapped out that caramel for something like peanut butter or something like that? Something that's got a little bit more fat, a little bit more protein, that's going to kind of slow the absorption of those carbohydrates and result in less spike in the blood sugar level. So again, I'm going to make nutritional suggestions without prescribing any changes to her diet, because again, we do not prescribe. And that's really it, guys. 3 populations down. We kind of combined them all in the soap notes. I don't think that happens for the rest of them. Yeah, any questions today? How are y'all feeling? I see a couple thumbs up. Love that. All right.